HISD Superintendent Richard Carranza has hit the ground running. He's already visited several campuses and interacted with the students and staff. He's also met with various community members, leaders, and parents. Today, it's my honor to introduce you to our new Superintendent of Schools, Richard Carranza. Superintendent Carranza, thank you for being with us today. It's very nice to have you here in Houston on the ground.
It's good to be here. I'm glad to be here in Houston.
Well, give us a little background about yourself, who you are, and give us that little insight as to who Superintendent Richard Carranza is. Well,
thank you. So I'm honored to be here. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. I started the public school system in Tucson, Arizona, only speaking Spanish, so I would be categorized today as an English language learner. My parents, I'm very proud of the fact I'm the son of two blue-collar parents, blue-collar workers. My dad was a journeyman sheet metal worker, and my mother was a beautician. But my brother and I entered the public schools only speaking Spanish because my parents wanted to make sure we wouldn't lose the ability to communicate with family members, and trusted the schools would teach us English. So I am a fervent, unapologetic, pro-public school supporter. And that's why I've dedicated my life and my career to public education. But I grew up in Tucson. I was a teacher for almost 10 years. I was a high school social studies, bilingual social studies teacher. And then I also founded a mariachi program at the high school where I taught, that's still in existence today. But then moved through the ranks. I became an assistant principal at the high school, then a high school principal. I was recruited to Las Vegas, Nevada, which at the time was the 5th largest school district in the country, about 316,000 students. And I was a high school principal of a high school there of over 4,000 students. Then was promoted into a region superintendent position in the Clark County School District. Then left there when I was selected as a deputy superintendent for instruction, innovation, and social justice in San Francisco. And for the last 4 years, I've been the superintendent of schools in the San Francisco Unified School District. That's kind of my career trajectory. But I am just really, really passionate about being a teacher. And I still consider myself a teacher. And most of the decisions that I make are always kind of through that lens. How is this going to have an effect in the classroom with our children?
Well, I know we on the Board of Education had we're very happy that we were able to recruit you to come to Houston from San Francisco. I understand there's not that much in San Francisco, and there's much more here in Houston. But we're happy that you're here. So what is your vision for HISD? How do you see your being here moving us forward?
Well, I think there's a number of things that are important to keep in mind. I've been interested in Houston ISD for a while, because Houston is a very innovative city. It's a very diverse city, but more specifically, Houston ISD, HISD, is an incredibly innovative school district. It's a well-run school district, and counter to the narrative that sometimes gets publicized, there's some incredible things that are happening in the schools and in the community in HISD. So part of my reason for wanting to be here was that it is the diverse school district that I would really want to work in. I want to be able to use my language skills, speak Spanish in the community ubiquitously, which wasn't always the case in other places that I've been. But more than that, I was really drawn by the ability to take a really good school district and being able to add my little piece to make it a great school district. And I truly believe that that's what can happen here. So my goal is to really spend some time in communities, learning about the context of what's happened in Houston ISD. Why is it that we do things the way we do them? Learning from and hearing from the residents in Houston about what are their hopes and dreams for their students and our students, and then really working collaboratively and very closely with the Board of Trustees around defining a mission with our community and a vision for what we want for every one of our students to be able to know and do when they leave our system. Those are my long-term and my immediate short-term goals as I go forward.
And you've been here a total of 6 days.
6 days.
So, you've had time to look around a little bit. What are some of the challenges that you see here in Houston?
You know, when I had the opportunity to meet with the Board of Trustees, I was actually very impressed with the Board of Trustees, because you have a board that has 9 individuals that are all passionate about making sure students are going to be successful in our district. The differences are that we have differences of how we think we should get there. But there is no doubt in my mind we're all moving in the same direction. So that's really, really intriguing. But more than that, I think it's really powerful to have that kind of a direction going forward. As I've been able to get on the ground and get into schools, and I'm really proud of the fact that I've been in schools every day that I've been on the job, not only in the community meetings, but also walking campuses. And I think there's a lot of really good work that's happening in Houston ISD. This is now the 4th state and the 4th school district that I've had the pleasure of working in. And I have to say that I've never found a group of more passionate individuals than I've seen already here in Houston that really want to do good things for students. That's a real benefit that I think we can capitalize on. The challenges that we have, I think there are some mega challenges and then some very localized challenges. The mega challenge is recapture in Robin Hood. That is the most pernicious challenge facing us as a school system, as a community, quite frankly.
And we're going to talk about that here in a few minutes.
Yeah, that's a big issue for us because it's going to have an effect on everything that we do and everything that we're able to do as we go forward. Some of the more localized challenges are, as I walk schools, I think there are some disparities that I've seen in terms of facilities. There's some disparities in terms of some of the instructional practices that I've seen. But those are things that we can work on. And you know, I think the community is going to hear me talk a lot about equity. And I'm not talking about equity in the sense that we're going to take and give. I'm talking about equity in terms of how do we as a system structure ourselves so that we're able to provide the supports to all students to meet the very high bar that we've set for graduation and for success. I think that's a ripe conversation to have. I also think that, you know, I've really encountered people that want to believe that they are making a difference. So being transparent and being communicative, but also being inclusive and hearing many voices have a voice in determining how we go forward is also going to be a goal. It's a challenge right now because some folks don't believe us. But I think that the more we're out in the community and listening to community and involving the community, the more the community is going to understand that we actually mean what we're saying.
How do you see bringing some of this equity into the school system? I know you touched on it just a second, but do you have anything a little more focused?
Sure. So as I'm taking feedback from the community and these the listening tour that I'm currently on, one of the themes that is starting to really bubble to the surface is this notion that we want to educate the whole child. And as I speak to that notion that I personally and professionally have always held, that we need to educate students beyond just the test. While it's really important that students know how to read and write, and they know how to read and write at a very high level, it's also important that students have an ability to express their creativity, that they have an opportunity to be able to take what they're learning in their English classrooms, social studies, math, science classrooms, and actually apply it in very different ways. It could look like applying it in a fine arts capacity. It could be drawing, it could be dance, it could be the spoken word, it could be extracurricular activities. But students need to have a well-rounded opportunity and exposure to lots of different experiences, which that will help them find that spark that keeps them either engaged in school or sparks their interest in something that they want to pursue as a career. That is finding some real resonance as I go around and talk to the community. If we keep that in mind, then what we should be thinking about is how do we structure our conversations going forward so that we're keeping the vision that we have for our student profile squarely at the center, and then we're working to build the systems and supports to get that kind of a graduate from our school district. That is a general way of talking about how we're going to focus ourselves and the decisions that we make around allocation of resources around supporting our student vision.
Well, you know, in a nutshell, Houston is about 300 square miles. HISD is about 300 square miles of territory, of area that we have to serve, of children. We're the largest school district in Texas, the 7th largest in the country, 215,000 kids. And we have children that are going across town every morning, thousands of kids, because they're following programs that they'd like to attend and finish up in. Do you see any way of reducing that time on buses to get children closer to schools at home?
Well, again, this is my 27th year in education, and every year somebody has at one point or another said, well, we can't throw money at the issue. I just wish that one of those years they would have thrown money at the issue, because it comes down to funding. Yes. President Rodriguez, if you look at the amount of money that is spent every year to incarcerate youth in the state of Texas, and you compare that to the per pupil allocation that school districts get to educate youth, you're going to find a vast discrepancy. So we either pay now or we most definitely pay later. So if we were to able to, as a Houston community, the largest school district in Texas, start that conversation in the state of Texas about changing the paradigm so that we don't view funding of education as an expense, but we instead view it as an investment in the future of Texas, I think we could actually move the funding needle. And the reason I say that as it relates to your question about transporting children across the city is that, students have to go to where programs are right now that interest them. But if we could develop programs in other sectors of the city, in other parts of the city, if we could expand the number of programs that we have so that you have a much more neighborhood based, so that students wouldn't have to be on a bus, then I think everybody agrees we would do our part to reduce traffic congestion. But aside from that, students would be able to have in their very localized community really strong educational opportunities. That can't happen unless we have the funding to be able to implement that. So it's all tied together. It's important on how we make decisions around the allocation of resources that we have at hand, but the broader conversation also has to include how do we bring additional resources to the table so that we're able to actually go out and develop and expand and promulgate those successful programs that we are already curating and incubating here in the Houston Independent School District.
Well, I've been to some of your community meetings and I've heard some of the questions, and those from the community, the public asking about the district. But we also have a staff of about 29,000 employees, and they want to know what your vision is about the teachers, about the administration, about what you plan to do with HISD's employees. How are they going to work? Promotions from within, you're going to be recruiting. How do you see that happening?
Well, that's a great question, because I think that like all public school employees, educational employees are often underpaid. So I think the issue of compensation is an issue that I know the trustees have mentioned, and I'm very receptive to looking at how do we compensate our employees so that we're not losing our employees and that we're keeping employees. As I visited, I've met some folks that have been in the system for 30 years, 35 years. I met one principal who's been here 50 years. That's incredible dedication to the system, but our employees shouldn't have to take a vow of poverty to do the public service that is called for in a public school system like Houston Independent School District. So compensation is an issue that I know we're going to tackle. Again, it goes back to resource allocation. The other thing that I think, because I come from the classroom, I think that it's really, really important for us to have standards that students are meeting around academic achievement. But I also think it's the ripe opportunity to diversify that conversation and move beyond just test scores. In the community meetings, I often will share with the community when I'm asked about this question that in my career, especially my leadership career, I've had hundreds of interviews that I've done to hire staff. And in those interviews, not once have I ever brought in all of the candidates and sat them at a table and given them a test, and then the highest scoring candidate is the one that gets the job. Because that's not the way we hire people. So if that's not the way we hire people, it's important that people, for example, are able to communicate. It's important that they're able to work on teams, that they're able to be creative thinkers, and they can innovate, and they're good communicators. All of those things are important when we're hiring. So then why do we label schools or label students as either failure or not based on a test score? Now, it's important that they have capacities and are able to demonstrate subject matter knowledge, but it's also important that they're able to do all those other things that I just mentioned as well. You know, they should be creative. They should have an opportunity to work with their hands. They should be able to work on teams. They should be able to demonstrate what they're learning more than just on a piece of paper. So I think that's a conversation that, not abandoning standards, not abandoning accountability, but rearranging the conversation so that instead of talking about accountability first, we talk about capacity building to get us to the goals that we want. And if we talk about how do we build capacity in our teachers and our administrators to build those kind of learning environments, the accountability will come. But I think it's important to have that conversation of capacity building first. The other thing that I'll say about our employees is that I also, one of the themes that is emerging in these conversations, because we have many of our employees and colleagues that come, is an issue of climate and how they feel, and do they feel listened to and respected, and do they feel that there is a climate that's going to reward them for their service to the district. Well, I want to be really clear. Our reward is making sure that our students walk across that graduation stage with a diploma, fully prepared to make life decisions as they go forward. But aside from that, I want to, and part of why I'm out in the community and walking schools, is I want folks to get to know me and understand that there will be a climate where we want to hear diverse voices, but there's also going to be a climate where we're going to demand people be part of the solution. So it's better to have that conversation publicly and openly rather than feel that you can't have it in an open way. I think that's a sign of a healthy organization. And quite frankly, it's kind of the kind of organization that I want to be part of.
One of the interesting things that the Board of Education found in you while we were going through our recruiting was that you're a collaborator. You've done a lot of collaboration with outside entities of the school district in San Francisco. Can you explain and expound on what your thoughts are to do that here in Houston?
Well, the school district is a microcosm of society. So the ills that plague society are also apparent in our schools. So issues of poverty, issues of violence, issues of homelessness, issues of hunger, all of these issues that plague society also are evident when kids walk through our doors. So when we think about how we're serving all of our students, especially from an equity perspective, giving them what they need to reach the bar that we've set, then it's incumbent upon us to then look beyond the district and really form some partnerships with others that can help us meet the needs of our students. In my experience, when we've been able to do that, we've been able to partner, for example, with the municipal government, which has a department that works with families that are homeless. We work with the police department, not only our internal police department, but our external police departments, to really ensure safe corridors for students to walk to and from school or to travel to and from school. When a teacher is teaching, and a teacher will know his or her students very well, I wouldn't expect a teacher to feed a hungry student or to provide shelter to a student that doesn't have a home. But I would really expect us as an organization to have the information available so that teacher knows who to access to get that help for that student. I think that's the power of partnerships. At the very granular level. I think at a more systemic level, understanding that our students want real world experiences. So if they're learning about mathematics, if they're learning about algebra, they really want to know, how do I apply those algebraic concepts into writing code where I can actually create a game that I could maybe sell. So in order to do that, you have to have partnerships. And in Houston, we are ripe with huge corporations, lots of organizations that are clamoring to partner with us. So part of what I think we have to do, and what I plan on doing, is to go out and meet with that community as well, those individuals, and let them know that, look, we're not wholesale opening up our doors for just anyone that wants to come in and partner, but let's have a conversation about how can we partner, what are we going to partner around, and how are we going to know that our partnership is successful, the outcomes? What will we say and be able to point to say, this partnership really met the needs of what we decided we wanted to do, and it's making an impact on students. In my experience, when you're able to have those focused conversations and you have a willingness to partner, I have found that a number of organizations and companies and corporations and philanthropic organizations in the community will be willing to come to the table to partner for the betterment of our students. It's a long process, but it doesn't have to be an extensively long process. It just has to be a focused process.
Well, you know, you've mentioned the traffic in Houston. You mentioned a little bit about the weather. So as you've been here a total of 6 days, do you have some sort of 90-day plan that you're trying to put together for the district?
Yes, so in my conversation with the Board of Trustees, one of the first priorities, obviously, you know, not having been blessed to have been born in Houston or to have been born a Tejano, I'm a Tejano by choice and a Houstonian by choice. So part of what I want to do is be respectful of the community. While I may know some things based on what I've done before and have some ideas, I think it's just very respectful to come into a community and to listen and to hear the context within which the community has been living and making decisions. So that's what I'm doing. So the first 60 days is really getting out into the community, part of the listening tour, but then also other meetings that are being sponsored by trustees and others in the district to really get to talk to people and understand, in my mind, what is the context? What is the Houston context? What is the HISD context? The plan is going to be to bring all of this information that we're gathering to the board and have a report where I can surface some of the major themes that I'm hearing or I've heard as part of this listening and learning tour. And then to invite the Board of Trustees to lead with me a conversation in the greater Houston community around defining the vision for what we want our student to be, our student graduates to be. And by that I mean it's not the same old vision statement that you think of putting it on a wall and everybody memorizes it or not. I'm talking about what should that student look like that walks across the stage and gets a diploma? Not physically, but what should they know, be able to do? What should they be able to know? If you're a business person in the city, would you hire that student? If you're an admissions counselor, would you admit them to your school, to your university? If you're a recruiter, would you admit them or recruit them to your armed service? Defining what those characteristics are that we want every student to be able to demonstrate when they graduate is going to be our vision of our graduate. And once we've been able to come to a consensus of what that vision is, then everything else that we will do, from budgeting to facilities allocation to decisions we make around magnet programs and attendance areas, should all be then focused around helping us ensure that we're moving towards developing that vision of our graduate. That's going to start, that whole conversation will happen within the first 90 days. It's not going to be completed within the first 90 days, but at least the roadmap of how our plan is to get to that conversation will happen within the first 90 days. Now, one of the things you'll notice, President Rodriguez, that I continuously refer to is this notion of how are we going to have these conversations? And I think that part of what has been buoyed by my listening and learning tour is this theme that's coming forward where the public really wants to be involved and included in the conversation. They don't want something to just appear that says, okay, this is what we're doing. They want to have a voice. So I think it's going to be really important going forward that we're transparent, that we're honest, that we're open, so that more of the community can see the wonderful things that are happening in HISD and have a role in owning that.
This week we got some great news that Fur High School was the recipient of a $10 million grant. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Sure. So it was an extremely competitive process, nationwide process, but it was really for schools that have a plan for being innovative in a different way and to be able to follow through on their innovation. And this is going to be a 3-year grant of $10 million to help them make that happen. So we should be extremely proud of FIR, one of 10 school districts or schools in the nation that got this grant. Now, that's important because oftentimes where you hear in a large system about innovation, you tend to look externally to find points of innovation elsewhere. What I'm thrilled about is that here's a perfect example of a school in a neighborhood that is a rich neighborhood in terms of cultural richness. But that some people would say, well, I'm not sure I want to send my kid there. You go to FIR and they are passionate that every student has a name, everyone knows who that student is. The principal at FIR, Dr. Simmons, is just a incredible advocate for her students. And what you will find when you go to FIR is that every student has a name. And that students know that if they don't come to school, somebody's going to call them, and if you're not careful, the principal's going to show up at your doorstep saying, where are you? So they know and they're known. You'll find that when you walk to FIR, students have a sense of purpose. They're walking to class, they're coming to class on time. They have an incredible spirit of pride in their school. They own the school. You look at the school, you don't see trash being thrown. You don't see tagging on the walls. You see kids that are proud of their school, are proud of wear the school emblem and school colors and speak very highly of their school. That's what I want every school to be like. I want every student to be proud of their school and own their school. And in addition, to be innovative. So the kinds of innovation that FIR is going to really build upon with this investment of capital is hopefully going to be what we're going to be able to capture as a district as a best practice, and then think about how do we then take that and promulgate that across the district as a good practice.
It's really exciting to hear what you have to say, to get Houston to move forward with the vision of education for a global student. And we're excited that you're here. Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros. Bienvenidos a Houston, Texas.
Es un honor estar aquí con ustedes, and I'm just thrilled to be here. And I've already got my barbecue spots, so I'll take more recommendations. But I'm off to a pretty good start.